Moses Malone was a basketball pioneer, one of the most dominant big men to ever step on the court. A three-time NBA MVP, a Finals MVP, and an unstoppable force in the paint, he revolutionized the game with his rebounding and relentless work ethic. He was the foundation of championship teams, an icon of toughness, and one of the greatest players to ever lace up. But after the bright lights of the NBA faded, life took a different turn. Despite earning millions, financial struggles and poor investments left him without the security many of his peers enjoyed. His health declined, as years of physical battles took their toll, and undiagnosed heart issues would ultimately cut his life short. Despite his legendary career, he was often overlooked, rarely receiving the recognition he deserved from the modern NBA. He should have been celebrated as one of the game's greatest, yet his name faded into history. This is the tragic reality of Moses Malone at 60 years old. Moses Malone's career was nothing short of legendary. He was a force of nature, a rebounding machine, and a three-time MVP who changed the game forever. His journey to greatness was unlike any other, starting from humble beginnings in Petersburg, Virginia, where he was born on March 23, 1955. Raised by a single mother, life was never easy, but even in the face of hardship, basketball became his escape. From an early age, it was clear he had a gift, one that would take him further than anyone imagined. In high school, he dominated his competition, establishing himself as one of the best young prospects in the country. Colleges lined up to recruit him, expecting him to become a star at the next level. But Malone had other plans. Instead of following the traditional path, he made history by becoming the first player to jump straight from high school to the professional ranks, signing with the Utah Stars of the ABA in 1974. Many doubted whether an 18-year-old kid could compete with grown men at the highest level. But Malone didn't just compete, he dominated. His ability to outwork and outmuscle his opponents made him an instant force. As the ABA merged with the NBA, Malone transitioned to the bigger stage, where he would soon cement his status as one of the greatest big men the league had ever seen. His breakout years came with the Houston Rockets, where he quickly became the most dominant rebounder in basketball. By 1979, he had claimed his first MVP award, averaging over 24 points and 17 rebounds per game. His relentless pursuit of the ball, his ability to score in the paint, and his physical toughness set him apart from every other center in the league. He refused to be out-hustled. By 1982, Malone had solidified himself as the best big man in basketball, winning his second MVP award. That year, he was traded to the Philadelphia 76ers, where he became the missing piece to a team searching for championship glory. He wasted no time making an impact, delivering one of the most dominant seasons in NBA history. He won his third MVP award in 1983, leading the Sixers with his scoring, rebounding, and defense. Before the playoffs even began, Malone made a bold prediction: 4-4-4. He believed the Sixers would sweep every series on their way to the title. They came close, going 12-1 in the postseason and steamrolling their way to the championship. Malone was unstoppable, averaging 26 points and 15 rebounds per game in the playoffs and capturing the Finals MVP award. At that moment, he had reached the pinnacle of the sport. His rebounding dominance, physicality, and ability to control the game made him one of the most feared and respected players of his generation. He wasn't just a great player, he was a game changer, a blueprint for future big men. For a decade, Moses Malone was the most dominant force in the NBA, redefining what it meant to be a center. He battled against the best: Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Robert Parrish, and Patrick Ewing, and outworked them all. His greatness wasn't built on flash or finesse, it was built on hard work and an unrelenting desire to win. But even for basketball's greatest warriors, time is undefeated. As the years went on, the game began to change, and Malone's physical dominance started to wane. He continued playing into the 1990s, bouncing between teams as he chased one last taste of glory. By 1995, his playing days were over. He was a 12-time All-Star, a 3-time MVP, a Finals MVP, and one of the greatest rebounders the game had ever seen. But despite all his accomplishment, his legacy never quite received the recognition it deserved. His name often faded into the background when discussing the greatest players in NBA history, overshadowed by more media-friendly stars. Moses Malone paved the way for high school players to go straight to the pros, revolutionized rebounding, and redefined what it meant to be an elite big man. He was a champion, a leader, and a player who never stopped working. But as the game moved forward, his name became a footnote in history, a legend whose impact was too often forgotten. Moses Malone dominated the paint for decades, but as age caught up with him, the offers and opportunities faded. Without a clear post-career plan, life outside of basketball became uncertain. After years of controlling the boards and overpowering opponents, his body could no longer keep up with the physical toll of the game. By the late 1980s, Malone began suffering from chronic knee problems, a common issue for big men. His ability to dominate the glass started to decline, and with each passing season, the rebounding machine that had carried teams to championships began to slow down. Though still respected, Malone found himself bouncing between teams in the early 90s, searching for one last opportunity. He played for the Atlanta Hawks, remaining a productive veteran presence, but the same explosiveness that made him an MVP had faded. Stints with the Milwaukee Bucks and San Antonio Spurs followed, but it became evident that his days as the most dominant player were behind him. By 1995, after 21 years of professional basketball, his career came to an end. Unlike many of his peers, Malone had never been one for the spotlight. His ability to dominate the glass started to decline, and with each passing season, the rebounding machine that had carried teams to championships began to slow down. Though still respected, Malone found himself bouncing between teams in the early 90s, searching for one last opportunity. He played for the Atlanta Hawks, remaining a productive veteran presence. The same explosiveness that made him an MVP had faded. Stints with the Milwaukee Bucks and San Antonio Spurs followed, but it became evident that his days as the most dominant player were behind him. By 1995, after 21 years of professional basketball, his career came to an end. Unlike many of his peers, Malone had never been one for the spotlight. He didn't engage in flashy endorsement, didn't have the media presence of stars like Magic Johnson or Charles Barkley, and never built a personal brand beyond his on-court success. This made his transition into retirement particularly difficult. Many NBA greats moved into coaching, front office roles, or television analysis. But Malone, a man of few words, didn't fit the mold of a commentator or executive. Without a clear role in the NBA world, his post-playing career was far less structured than that of his contemporaries. There were no lucrative TV contracts, no coaching opportunities, and no major business ventures. He had earned millions throughout his career, but without strong financial guidance, maintaining long-term stability became a challenge. Unlike other former players who built wealth through endorsements, real estate, or ownership stakes in teams, Malone had few revenue streams beyond what he made during his playing days. As the years went on, Malone's presence in the public eye faded. While other retired stars remained active at NBA events, served as ambassadors, or found new ways to stay involved, Malone withdrew from the limelight. The game moved on without him, and as younger generations of fans idolized new superstars, legacy started to slip through the cracks of history. The man who had revolutionized rebounding, won 3 MVP awards, and led a team to a championship found himself on the outside looking in. His decline wasn't dramatic, but rather a slow drift into obscurity. He had never been a player who sought attention. When the spotlight faded, he didn't chase after it. While the basketball world celebrated the greatness of other all-time legends, Malone was rarely mentioned in the same breath as Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Bill Russell, or Shaquille O'Neal, despite his unmatched dominance in his prime. His impact on the game was undeniable, yet the accolades and tributes never fully reflected his contributions. Retirement should have been a time for him to be honored and remembered for everything he had done for the game. Instead, he drifted further away from the sport had given everything to. He had been a warrior on the court, a relentless competitor who never stopped fighting. But once the battles were over, he was left without a structured future and without the same level of acknowledgement his greatness warranted. Moses Malone had spent 2 decades proving himself as one of the hardest-working and most dominant players in basketball history. But once his career ended, his legacy, his financial future, and his place in the game became uncertain. The league moved on, the fans moved on, and the opportunities that once seemed endless disappeared. A career defined by effort, resilience, and determination had come to an end, and for Malone, life after basketball was not what it should have been. For all his dominance, Moses Malone never had the financial security or lasting recognition that many of his peers enjoyed. He should have been celebrated as one of the greatest, but instead, he found himself forgotten by the modern game. Despite earning millions throughout his career, financial stability was never guaranteed. Unlike some of his contemporaries, who secured lucrative endorsement deals and built businesses, Malone lacked the same financial acumen. He made his money through sheer hard work on the court. Without proper management, much of that wealth failed to sustain him long-term. While Magic Johnson built a business empire and Michael Jordan turned his name into a billion-dollar brand, Malone never ventured into major investments or endorsements. His quiet personality and preference to stay out of the spotlight meant fewer opportunities to leverage his status as an all-time great for financial gain. In an era where top players transitioned into ownership, commentary, or business moguls, Malone remained on the sidelines without the safety net that others created for themselves. Even as NBA salaries skyrocketed after his playing days, Malone had retired before the financial boom that made modern athletes generationally wealthy. He played in an era where contracts, though lucrative, weren't structured with the same long-term benefits they are today. Without endorsement deals or financial advisors guiding him, he found himself with fewer resources than one would expect for a 3-time MVP. His money did not stretch far enough to provide the post-career security many assumed he would have. But it wasn't just financial struggles that defined his post-playing years. His legacy itself became an afterthought. Despite an incredible resume, Malone was often overshadowed in discussions about basketball's best big men. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar had longevity and 6 championships. Shaquille O'Neal had dominant physicality and charisma, and Hakeem Olajuwon was praised for his finesse and footwork. But Malone, one of the toughest and most relentless players ever, was often left out of those conversations. Younger NBA fans, unfamiliar with the era in which he played, rarely heard his name mentioned alongside the all-time greats. The NBA's marketing machine never truly embraced his legacy the way it did with other Hall of Famers. Highlight reels and anniversary celebrations often skipped over his dominance, focusing instead on players who had more media presence. He was a player defined by action, not words, and in a league that celebrated personalities as much as performance, his achievements were too easily forgotten. Even the franchise he led to a championship, the Philadelphia 76ers, failed to properly honor him. While Julius Erving remained the face of that 1983 title team, Malone's contributions were often underappreciated by casual fans. His faux prediction was legendary, his Finals MVP performance undeniable, yet the NBA rarely centered on his impact. When discussions arose about the best players of all time, he was often an afterthought rather than a cornerstone of basketball history. His influence on the game was immeasurable. He changed the way teams viewed rebounding, work ethic, and physical endurance. He paved the way for high school players to enter the professional ranks, setting the precedent for future stars like Kevin Garnett, Kobe Bryant, and LeBron James. But while their stories were celebrated, Malone's journey was hardly discussed. Moses Malone should have been a figurehead of NBA history, a player whose dominance was universally acknowledged. Instead, he remained largely unrecognized by newer generations of basketball fans. His name rarely spoken when discussing the sport's most iconic figures. While others received tributes, media attention, and business opportunities, Malone faded into the background. He had given everything to the game, but in return, the game seemed to forget him. Moses Malone was a warrior on the court, but in retirement, his health quietly declined. Without proper medical attention and support, his life was cut short far too soon. After years of enduring the physical demands of professional basketball, his body carried the wear and tear of 2 decades of dominance. The same relentless motor that made him unstoppable in the paint also masked warning signs of a deteriorating condition. Known for his quiet nature, Malone rarely spoke about pain or discomfort. To those around him, he appeared strong, just as he always had been. But beneath the surface, his health was failing. Despite his status as an NBA legend, Malone never prioritized regular medical checkups. Friends and former teammates later said he ignored symptoms that should have been cause for concern. Like many former athletes, he struggled with mobility issues after years of battling in the post. But more critically, undiagnosed heart problems loomed over him. Cardiovascular disease, a leading cause of death among retired athletes, went unnoticed until it was too late. On September 13, 2015, tragedy struck. Malone, just 60 years old, passed away in his sleep due to cardiovascular disease. He had been scheduled to play in a charity golf event the next morning, but never woke up. The news shocked the basketball world. He had shown no public signs of distress, no outward indication his life was at risk. His passing was a grim reminder of the importance of post-career medical care, something too many retired athletes neglect. Unlike other NBA legends who remained in the public eye, Malone's post-retirement years were lived in quiet isolation. He never sought attention and, after his playing days were over, drifted from the spotlight. While some players transitioned into media, coaching, or business ventures, Malone remained largely removed from the basketball world. He made occasional appearances at events, but was never a regular presence like many of his contemporaries. This detachment extended to his personal life. Reports suggested that Malone's reserved nature led to struggles in his relationships. He had always been a man of few words, someone who let his game do the talking. But off the court, this quiet demeanor sometimes created distance between him and those closest to him. Unlike some players who smoothly transitioned into a stable family life, Malone remained somewhat of a loner.
His reluctance to seek help, whether for his health or personal
Moses Malone,
reflected a deeper issue many former athletes face. When the game is over, the structure and routine that once defined them disappears. For Malone, whose life had revolved around basketball since his teenage years, adjusting to life without it was difficult. Without the structure of the game,
a Hall of Famer and a trail,
he seemed to withdraw from the world around him. Even as his health declined, he kept his struggles to himself. Whether it was pride, denial, or simply a habit of pushing through pain, Malone never made his health a priority. His death was not only a personal tragedy, but also a wake-up call for the NBA community. It exposed the need for better healthcare initiatives for retired players, especially those who spent years sacrificing their bodies for the game. Moses Malone was a giant in every sense, on the court, in the record books, and in the impact he left on the game. But in the end, his story is a heartbreaking reminder how quickly life can change. He had given everything to basketball. In retirement, the game he dedicated his life to seemed to move on without him. His passing underscored the need for better support systems for athletes who, after years of physical sacrifice, find themselves alone in their struggles. He should have had more time to enjoy the fruits of his labor, time to be honored the way legends deserve, time to live without the burden of the game weighing on his body. Instead, his life ended far too soon. His legacy remains undeniable, but his passing serves as a reminder that even the strongest warriors are not invincible. Moses Malone gave everything to the sport he loved, but in the end, it could not give him the time he deserved. Moses Malone should have been celebrated as one of the greatest of all time, but instead, he was left behind. His name rarely mentioned in the conversation of basketball's elites.
There's no way you
His
can
tragic
stop.
story is a cautionary tale about how quickly the game can move on, leaving even its greatest warriors behind. Despite being a three-time MVP, a Finals MVP, and one of the most dominant rebounders in NBA history, Malone's name was often missing when discussions about the greatest players took place. Players like Shaquille O'Neal, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and Wilt Chamberlain were regularly highlighted in debates about legendary centers, while Malone's contributions were frequently overlooked. His quiet nature, lack of flashy plays, and reserved personality contributed to his legacy fading into the background. While others embraced the media and built brands that lasted long after retirement, Malone remained distant, preferring to let his game speak for itself. In an era driven by storytelling and larger-than-life personalities, his legacy did not get the promotion it deserved. Even after his passing, the tributes were not as widespread as they should have been. The NBA recognized his contributions, but the
Nowitzki passes Moses Malone.
In comparison to what other legends received. His death was a reminder that not all greats are remembered equally. Despite leading one of the greatest teams of all time to an NBA championship, his name was slowly forgotten in mainstream discussions of basketball history.
Until Foles arrived, he's starting to stare at the official. Here's a travel on Malone, who came out eagerly to take that.
Unlike Michael Jordan, who built a billion-dollar empire, or Magic Johnson, who became a successful businessman, Malone never secured financial stability. His earnings, while substantial during his career, did not translate into lasting wealth. Without endorsement deals or major business ventures, he struggled in ways that many never realized. Beyond the financial struggles, Malone's passing underscored the importance of post-career medical care for retired athletes.
Jump shot a bit too eagerly and lost his footing.
Absorbing contact and putting his body through physical punishment. The long-term effects of such a grueling career took a toll on his health, yet, like many retired athletes, he did not receive the medical attention he needed. His passing from cardiovascular disease at just 60 years old was a tragedy that could have been prevented with better awareness and medical support. The NBA has taken steps to improve health care for former players, but Malone's death serves as a reminder that more needs to be done. Too many retired athletes, after giving everything to the game, are left without the resources they need to live stable lives.
Sixers kind of walking it into place now. Unusual style for them. Irving had to shoot quickly that time to get it over Bol.
Moses Malone didn't just play basketball. He changed the way the game was played. His ability to dominate the glass, outwork opponents, and lead by example made him one of the greatest to ever step on the court. But without the media presence of some of his peers, his impact was slowly forgotten. He should have been a household name, celebrated on the same level as the greatest centers of all time. Instead, his story became one of lost recognition and a reminder of how quickly the game moves on. Basketball prides itself on remembering its legends, but Malone's legacy has been left in the shadows for far too long.
They're among the three big men for the Sixers. Barkley taking it strong, gets it over Bol and Roundfield.
Yet, for all he gave to the game never truly gave back to him. His story is a warning to all athletes. Greatness on the court does not guarantee security off it. His legacy should have been cemented among the giants of basketball, but instead, he became one of the sport's forgotten heroes.